welcome to Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Carter Yepsen. Carter is a frequent guest on this podcast, and in this episode, we're going to talk about his experience in attending a 2-day Yanmar Diesel School. Yanmar is a very common brand of diesel engine on sailboats and other marine equipment. And I found our conversation to be really informative, and I think our listeners will find it helpful as well.
Yeah, Bela, I always enjoy your check-ins with Carter. I think listeners will also be fascinated by this because it's a cool concept, and we'll want to look out for the many benefits I think that at least I learned about of going to a diesel engine repair school. There's 3 questions particularly probably worth looking out for. First is that, at least that I had, is don't you need to be a mechanic to take a diesel repair course? And the second question is, why do you need to go to a fancy school like this if you just want to know how to change your oil and your coolant and stuff? Can't you find all that on YouTube? And then 3, another question which actually carries over from our last episode with Mike Malikoff is, where are good places to get parts so you can do repairs and maintenance on your engine? We were talking broadly last episode with Mike, and now kind of focusing in on very specialized diesel engine parts. So those are 3 things I think we want to look out for in today's conversation.
Those are great points, Mike. And I think Carter and I addressed all 3 of those in the conversation we had. So hopefully people will find this very helpful.
All right, well, let's get right to your discussion with Carter Yepsen.
Carter, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am okay. Did you go skiing today?
No, I did not.
I see.
It's ferocious out there.
Yeah, I turned on the mountain webcam like 8:15, and I noticed there was a big line of ski patrollers waiting to get on lift 1, and the gondola was not turning. So
yeah, right. I get the feeling a lot of the lifts are down. I mean, several big ski areas in the Northeast are just closed today. I think Stratton closed.
Yeah. So
yeah, we'll see. Tomorrow's supposed to be pretty windy as well. I mean, not as bad as today, but
yeah,
unfortunately, I think a lot of what snow they had on the trails will be blown into the woods.
Yeah, I'm planning on going up tomorrow.
Yeah, I am too.
Oh, good. I'll see you there then.
Yeah.
Did you ski over the weekend?
I did not. No, I was doing other things up in the Adirondacks. We have a camp up there, and I was hanging out with moving logs, clearing a long driveway. Okay.
Yeah. Super. Well, hey, so thanks for agreeing to be on the podcast again. You're becoming a regular. I'm gonna have to put you on retainer or something. But this time we want to talk about, you went to Yanmar Diesel Mechanics School training, whatever the right words are. And I thought it'd be wonderful to share your experience with our listeners, sort of what's entailed, what it was like, what you learn, et cetera. So why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about overall, sort of what is this?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Why would somebody do that? I think, if you, and I might ask you, what are your top 3 fears of when you're on a boat?
Right.
Might be a lee shore or a dragging anchor. For me, it's the engine conking out at an inopportune time.
Yes. That's my biggest fear, right?
Yeah.
And coming into our marina, I have about a half-mile narrow channel that I have to, it's when 2 boats cross each other, we're both very careful. And my fear is that either coming into the marina or leaving the marina or trying to get into the dock or out of the dock, driving down the fairway, the engine conks out.
Yeah. Right. Well, and we can talk about this. And a lot of times, we walk around our boats, we clean our boats, we inspect the sails and coil the lines. But sometimes we, I won't say neglect it, but we overlook the engine. Sure, we check the oil, but are you really confident that it's in tip-top shape?
Yeah.
Now I know I know what to look for. I have a process. I have the tools, knowledge.
Yeah. So that's I think all sailors, it's behooves yourself to have some level of knowledge about all the various different systems on your boat, because many times you're the only one that's going to be able to fix it. And getting towed. I've been towed once. It was on a charter, and we were out sailing in Tampa Bay, and the wind died. So I went to start the diesel, nothing.
Yeah.
Right. It didn't even crank. So I sort of did the quick sort of, check the connections and stuff, and I couldn't find anything. So called the charter company. They called Cito, and they came out and got us, and towed us back in, several miles back into the marina. But we lost a day. It basically cost a whole day of our time. It was an interesting experience. Doing it once is enough for me. I don't want to get towed. I don't want to get towed anymore.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was something simple. When we brought the other boat, they gave us another boat to take out. And when I brought that one back at the end of the charter, I asked the people there, so what was wrong with the boat? And they said, oh yeah, it was a loose wire.
Okay. Yeah.
And so anyway, I think knowledge is good. So where was this school that you went to, and what was its name?
It was at Mack Boring.
Okay.
And Mack Boring has been around on business, I think, almost 100 years. And they are the Yanmar importer for the U.S. So the school is in their warehouse in New Jersey, right off 287. But they have a teaching facility and a lab. They teach not just owners, but they teach mechanics at the marinas around the country. So ongoing.
So is this one of several different sort of class types that they offer?
Yeah, I think this is their end user class or end customer class. Then they have a wide variety of classes for mechanics.
Got it.
So,
and how long was this class?
This was 2 days, 2 full
2 days. Okay. And is it in the classroom, in the laboratory? Do you get the putts with an engine? Give us a few details.
Yeah, so the class starts in a classroom. I mean, a very nice classroom surrounded by diesel components and engines, blown up, an array of destroyed impellers, little pistons, big pistons, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a classroom setting, and the instructor is excellent. He was an instructor in the Navy for 20 years, and now is an instructor for the Yanmar importer. He was their chief, or probably still is one of their chief technical advisors in the U.S. So boat manufacturers, he'll work with the boat manufacturers if they're going to go with the Yanmar to make sure that they're implemented correctly. So very nice classroom setting, coffee, donuts, etc. And then right next to it is the lab. And the lab had no less than 14 diesel engines on stands, good lighting, and so each of the students, there were 6 students, each student had their own engine to work on, and they endeavor to get you the same model that you have. So I worked on my Yanmar 4JH3E. They had a 3-cylinder version. Mine's a 4-cylinder version. But I had my own engine to myself. My own, old tool set. A big Craftsman tool set on wheels. Paper towels and tools. Everything you needed. So when it was time to change the impeller or take out the heat exchanger, it was you doing it at your own pace with the instructor walking around. And then if you got done quickly, you could go, watch somebody else or help somebody else. with theirs if they were having trouble, or they were confused, or or just or doing a deep dive, for example. So that was just absolutely terrific. And then at Mac Boring, they're importers for a couple other different manufacturers as well, but they have a facility where they test the engines before they go out the door. And then they have I'll call it a what's the example? It's more like a dirty lab. So when we had one engine that we could play with and run it. So you hook the exhaust up to the outside, and you hook the water in, so it's cooling, and that's where we ran the engine out of fuel several different times and bled the injectors, a couple different ways. Everybody got a chance to do it. Again, with this guy who was a diesel mechanic for 30 years and showing us all his tricks of the trade. So,
Right. So what I imagine you do things like an oil change, changing the coolant, changing the water pump impeller, bleeding the injectors, or bleeding the fuel system. I should say. I mean, those are things that it would behoove anyone to know how to do. And what were there additional things that you guys did, like sort of, down another level that maybe if I was just, trying to take care of my own boat, I really wouldn't think of learning how to do?
Well, the instructor had, decades of experience. So he would give everyone his little tricks to make things go smoothly. For example, where your oil filter is on your boat, right? It's not very easy to get to. And when you take the oil, even if you've taken all the oil out of the boat, when you take the filter out, unless you have a whole bunch of paper towel underneath it, it's going to make a mess. So his little trick is he drills a hole in the bottom of the oil filter before he takes it out, and drains the oil into a cup.
Right.
Right. Well, okay, it makes sense. And that way, when he spins it off, he doesn't have a
big puddle of oil,
a little puddle and a bunch of oily paper towels.
Right. Running down my forearm towards my elbow.
Yeah. So that's just one example. And I've got, for every step on the boat, I've got one or two or three types of things.
Yeah. So I know, like on my boat, one of the big challenges for like changing the water pump impeller is access.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just envisioning, this classroom with an engine that has 360-degree access. Yeah. So you can get at it from any point of view. And in reality, in most sailboats, the engines are crammed into tiny spaces. And part of the big challenge in sort of, knowing how to do this is, boy, I can't get, if I had 360-degree access, I can put a normal wrench on that, but I don't have 360-degree access. So I got to put on a wrench that's kind of bent in this contortion shape. So were there some things that you guys talked about regarding that access issue?
It's a universal problem, and he gave lots of examples of manufacturers that have put engines in boats where you had to pull the engine out to do some maintenance items.
Yeah,
not an impeller, but he gave us some pretty good examples. For me, it was really just gaining the confidence of doing the impeller several times, and now I feel I could almost do it without looking, if that makes sense. I know where all the parts are.
Yeah.
And again, for him, it wasn't just pulling the impeller and putting a new one in. It was, here are the 5 things you examine while you're doing that. Here's what wears out. Here's the cover, inspect it. If it's wearing, you can flip it in a pinch. But every 3 years, I'm going by not by my notes, but change the impeller cover as well as the impeller. Always
Right.
change the O-ring. Don't put don't save the old one. He was very adamant about not pitching pennies. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and don't hoard old parts. Write the dates on the box when you get the parts, so you're sure that you're cycling through the parts. Probably one of the best takeaways is I have a little memory stick that he put together for every student in the class for their particular engine, with all the latest manuals, not just the manual that came with the boat, but the actual, I think it's 304 pages, the 304 page service manual that the mechanics use. I have that. I have
Oh,
the
wow.
latest parts manual that is 100 pages of parts, every system, every subsystem in the boat broken down with every part, and again the latest parts on
wow.
on a document.
That's
I have
really nice.
schematics. So the manual that comes with the book is written in 14 languages, and I have a little section written in English that you have to go to the back and cross-reference the schematics and parts breakdown, things like that. But it's very difficult to use. Now I have everything in English on in one document.
Very
in
nice.
great detail, and with the latest parts as well. My engine's 24 years old, and now I know that it's easy for me to order parts.
Nice. So speaking about parts, and there's always the question: do you get Yanmar parts? Do you go to Yanmar to buy the parts, or do you get aftermarket parts? Was there any discussion about that?
Well, we were at the Yanmar
Yes.
distributor, so I don't know if he was completely objective, but I mean, we did talk a little bit about that, and he was honest about what parts Yanmar makes and what they don't.
Right.
They don't make alternators. They probably some of the pumps they don't make. They're made by somebody else. So
right. Yeah, I know. Like on my engine, it's a Johnson pump for my raw water pump is a Johnson pump, and you can buy the Yanmar part for X number of dollars, and you could buy a Johnson part for something less than X, and you can buy a third party part for X over 2.
Yeah. So I guess if you were confident enough, and that third party part was an exact match.
Yeah.
Then he was fine with that.
Yeah. So I remember we had a conversation when you told me you were going to the school. I said, here's my number one big question, Carter. So I always wonder, after I change my fuel filter, right, and I purge the air out of the line, how long do I need to run my engine so that I can be confident that I got all the air bubbles out of it and I can pull away from the dock and it's not gonna die on me.
Yeah. I did ask him that question.
Yeah.
And he had a real world example of one time he was finishing up a service on a boat, and the people got to the boat and the kids were running around, and the owner was impatient to go, and he said, I'm good. And so he packed up his tools, and the owner left the dock and called him about 2 minutes later after the engine had died. And he said, I'll never not run the boat. And again, don't run it at idle, because he was very clear that when a diesel is at idle, it's barely sipping fuel.
Yeah.
So you want to bump the RPMs up a little bit and run it for 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned to me 1,000 RPM at 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's probably the rule of thumb. Bump it up to 1,000 or 1,200, and for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
We talked about again how to purge the carbon out of the system. He was adamant about running diesels at that service level RPM, not max RPM, but just below it. Most diesels have 2 RPMs, maximum, and then continuous. but
Mm.
run it for at least an hour every every few hours.
Oh, really?
Keep it
So
clean.
that frequent, huh?
Yeah, he was pretty adamant about that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember on my boat, on a tachometer, there's a dial. There's the red zone that I don't go in. And typically when I'm running my boat, I'm running between 2000 and maybe 2300 RPM is sort of where, if I'm running, sometimes sometimes lower than that. So the RPM you're talking about is actually higher than that.
Probably it's on my engine. There's a maximum RPM, maximum horsepower, and then there's a continuous RPM, continuous horsepower.
Okay.
And that would be the, that upper threshold.
And that's in the specifications. That's
Yes.
in that little memory stick you got with all those.
Well, it's actually, it's stamped on a piece of metal that's riveted to the manifold cover. You might have it as well.
Oh, okay. I never thought about looking there. So it's the continuous power output. It'll say X number of horsepower at certain RPM.
Yeah.
Continuous. And you're saying that's what we should run it at.
Well, again, I'm not a diesel mechanic, but yeah, he was saying it's designed to be run at that RPM, and that'll help burn out the carbon. And he'd passed around injectors that had, that were fouled, and we got the magnifying glass out and looked at the little, at the orifices in the various types of injectors, and you could see a clean one versus a dirty one.
Very good. I'm making a note of that, that RPM running, because I've heard, you hear all sorts of stuff about running your engine.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I've heard sort of a specific engine.
And at load.
Point.
Yeah. And under
and at load. Right. You're not doing that at the dock in neutral.
Right.
You're pushing the boat. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. That's a good takeaway.
And just another sort of takeaway is is that I mentioned my engine is 24 years old, and it only runs occasionally, right? And a lot of times it's not running in ideal conditions, right? It's it's the waves, it's rough, and the things are getting tossed around, or it's humid, or my boat used to be on salt water. Yours is on salt water. Not ideal conditions.
Right.
So, then we get back to the boat in the spring, and we expect everything to be fine. That's why he talked a lot about the service cycles. Of the how often you do things, every 200 hours or every year, and yeah, he was pretty adamant about just do everything every year. If it's another $50 worth of parts, in the grand scheme of things, if you are confident that the engine's going to be running well, isn't it worth $50?
Yeah.
To change both the fuel, both fuel filters as well as the oil filter, and why not?
Right. Why not? That's what
what
do they say? Penny wise, a pound foolish, or something like that. Some old saying about that. So speaking of, putting away for the winter, did you guys talk anything about sort of winterizing the engine and then in the spring commissioning it again?
Yeah, and there weren't any real revelations for me on that. It's all these things are spelled out really well in the manual. Did talk a little bit about if you were putting the boat away for more than the off season. Maybe running a fuel additive into the fuel. We did talk about additives, and he's fine with them, but it's not a one type additive serves all needs. What are you trying to do? Just don't throw an additive in. Are you trying to boost the cetane level? Or are you trying to deal with old fuel? Do you suspect dirty fuel in the tank? Those types of things.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, and he said, at the end of the year, fill up the fuel tank. If you can't empty it, then fill it. He said it'd be better to empty it, but that's probably not an option for most people. So fill it.
Yep. Yeah, I do that. I do that. I go over, I have this ritual. I last just before I'm putting it away, I go over and I pump out my holding tanks and I fill up the fuel tank.
Top off. Yeah.
And that's sort of my ritual at the end of the season. And then so try to keep that airspace as small as possible in the fuel tank so you can't get a lot of condensation.
Because condensation turns to water and water goes to the bottom of the tank. Yeah.
Right. And in diesel fuel, it can sometimes have stuff grow in it.
Right.
Which I don't have how anything can grow in diesel fuel, but there's always some kind of bacteria or something that can figure out how to grow and whatever. So cool.
We talked about tools. And he sent us home with recommended tool, a toolkit. How he collects oil and things like that, different types of buckets and things like that, just to, from years of doing it.
Yeah. So speaking of tools, was there anything on that list that he recommended you should have that you didn't have, or was a surprise to you?
No, not really. And I have a sort of a mishmash of tools on the boat, but I have done some little upgrades, and I think I will package things differently. So I'll have all my wrenches in one place, all my screwdrivers in another place. He has some really nice little, I'll call them dental tools, little picks and things like that. If you want to get an O-ring out that's stubborn, or the impeller, or cleaning things out. So I got a nice set of I call them dental tools. They're a little bigger than that, but I have a real nice set of those now.
Yeah. And so I have on my boat, I have, one of those big sort of toolkits that comes in a plastic case, and it's got a set of metric sockets and a set of English sockets on it, and a bunch of closed end wrenches and open end wrenches, like 300 pieces, it's sort of how they sell them. And, a bunch of wrenches for taking oil filters off and that kind of stuff. I also keep electrical, a voltage meter, on the boat for checking continuity of stuff. And I'm trying to think. And I have,
part of the class was how to test the starter and the solenoid, and using that multimeter.
Yeah.
Which is, I have a multimeter as well, but now
now you know how to use it and test
now
stuff.
I know, where what points to check.
Yeah. Super. So overall, this sounds like it was I had one other question. So if you think about people who own, diesels, a 30 or 40-year-old diesel can be very different than one that's 1 or 2 years old. In other words, the newer ones are much more electronic. A lot more stuff is done electronically, whereas in the older ones, everything's mechanical. So when you had your pick of engines, did they have not only the different sizes, but also age ranges?
Yeah. So in my class, 6 people, and a couple of the fellas had pretty big power boats, and we're talking big turbocharged engines, 300 horsepower.
Yeah.
So two of the guys had engines like that, and the other folks were all sailors and had smaller engines. Some of the folks had real small 40-year-old engines. So they scraped together pretty much something for everybody that was really close to what they had. The concepts of how the engines run and the maintenance and things are, I call them 90% over
the same. Yeah.
So the electronics guys, they call it the common rail electronic fuel injection is different. Some things you would adjust differently, but I found it interesting.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
and the guy could handle all the questions, everything in stride. So everybody was, I think, left satisfied. Yeah, two full days. You know, I've noticed that there are a lot of other diesel classes out there.
Yeah.
Some offered by the manufacturers or the distributors that look pretty good, and then there's some real short online ones and YouTubes and things that I think that I think they're okay, but there's really no substitute for hands-on.
Yeah. Yeah. This sounds wonderful.
So,
So, would you share with us how much it cost?
yeah, it was around $2,000.
Okay. So
Which I
about
think,
$1,000 a day. Yeah.
on the high end of things. In this case, you get what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you had a great experience. You're very happy you did it. And it's given you not only a set of skills, but now some confidence as well, that if something goes wrong, you at least know where to poke at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they steered me to where they recommended I get parts, so I could the authorized Yanmar parts
Yes.
dealer that handles my service area.
Yeah.
And again, I was completely confident this time that I was getting the latest part, because the parts that are in my manual haven't been made in 20 years.
Yes.
The impeller has been the part number has changed 3 or 4 or 5 times from what I can tell.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because I have the manual that came with mine.
Yep.
And, you put in that part number and it says obsolete or, no longer available. And then trying to figure out what the latest part number is sometimes not all that easy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, yeah, so I can't wait. I'm waiting for spring, and I already have all my parts. And I'm gonna,
Yeah. Hey, so
Okay.
share with us where did he recommend getting your parts from? Because that's always a big question in people's
Yeah, I
minds.
think the company is called Toad, TOAD, and they're an online marine parts. But I think they focus a lot on engine parts
Uh-huh.
in addition to other things. So rather than the big names that we all know of Defender and West and things, probably they might have the equipment as well, but the website of Toad Marine was
I'm just looking it up.
really good for you
Yeah.
put in the part number that you think you want, and
Yeah.
then it gives you what it has been replaced with.
Oh, wow.
And other other related parts that might go into it or be ordered with it.
Oh, that's a great tip. I'm glad I asked you that question. Yeah, I just got onto their website, and yeah, it's just like if you just type in Toad Yanmar into a search space, it'll pop up, and this looks great.
Yeah, and I ordered that from them, and the stuff was here in 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
But yeah, I really like the parts cross-referencing and
Super.
the
Yeah, I always find that a challenge, particularly when you're fishing around for parts, and you never know if you're getting the right part. And there have been times when I bought the boat, there was like 3 different water pump impellers that the previous owner left, and all 3 were different.
exact same thing here. Yeah.
Right. They were like, I mean, they were all the same diameter, but one had 6 veins on it, the other one had 10 veins on it, and I was like, well, which one of these is the right one? Because it makes a difference as to how how
Yeah,
it
he would say,
performs and stuff.
yeah, either throw them away or make it really clear of what these things are if you want the. But yeah, get a new one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And don't worry about the $20. Just go get another one.
Right. All right. Hey, Carter, this has been really great. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about this experience that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I think you covered it all. Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Well,
great
super.
having a truly professional instructor. That's what he does for a living, is take care of diesel engines and teach people or teach mechanics
Yeah.
how to keep them running.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was a great experience. You got me all enthused now to throw out my old parts and, and get some real parts from Toad. Nice plug for those guys.
Yeah.
And it'll be great. So looking forward to a good sailing season, and hopefully we'll do some sailing together.
Yeah, I hope so.
And it sounds like tomorrow we'll do some skiing together.
That would be great.
Yeah. All right, Carter. Hey, thanks so much for,
Okay.
for being on the podcast.
All right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Bela.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Hey, Bela, cool interview. Carter always impresses me with his dedication to improving his sailing knowledge. I mean, this is, a person who's, he's retired, I think, right? You had told me, and he really takes every opportunity to either learn in a structured or unstructured way about sailing, kind of his, one of his current passions. What do you think from your perspective are the pros and cons of attending a diesel engine course like the one Carter did?
So I think there's a lot of pros. To me, the only two cons, and let me talk about them first. One is you got to have a 2-day chunk of time, and for some people that's really difficult to have. This one happens to be this way. I think Carter mentioned there's some courses that are kind of hybrid, some are online, some are hands-on, or some combination thereof. So there's many organizations that do these types of courses. Some are more generic about diesels. This one happened to be, as Carter mentioned, it's the Yanmar distributor, and they're talking only about Yanmar engines. And the great thing about going to this one was that Carter got to actually work on the engine he has in his boat. So because they had a whole pile of Yanmar engines there. I think the other challenging thing is, cost some money, and that may be out of bounds for people. But again, there's a bunch of different options. So to me, those are the two potential downsides. It's a 2-day time commitment, and it's going to cost you some money. However, let's talk about the good things about having this knowledge, because what you're talking about is basically acquiring knowledge on how to do things. Knowledge is great to have. I'm a big fan of YouTube University, as some people call it. I've learned a lot of things on YouTube. I've also seen a lot of conflicting things on YouTube, particularly when it comes to things like sailing. It's amazing how many, whether they're talking about how to do something in heavy weather or whether they're talking about how to fix something or change your oil, I often find some things that I scratch my head and go, that doesn't make sense. And I'll find conflicting information. The other interesting thing is that, when Carter told me he was going down to take this class, I said, Carter, here's the question I have about changing your fuel filter. So, diesel engines require very clean fuel to run. So on my diesel engine, or on most, I have a Yanmar also, on most diesel engines, there's 3 fuel filters, right? So there's like a big fuel filter that oftentimes looks like a spin-on oil filter, and it's sort of a fuel filter and separates out any water that might be in the fuel. And then there's another fuel filter that's sort of a finer mesh, right? It filters out, bigger particles. And then there's a super, super fine filter just before the engine. So there's 3 filters on them. And when you change these filters, it's important to get all of the air out of the line. So, there's, because you unscrew the filter or you take the filter off, if it's in a canister, you break the seal, and there's sort of a technique that you fill up the little, if you're doing a spin-on filter, you fill the filter up with diesel fuel, you screw it back on, and then most of these systems some way have a way that there's a mechanical pump, a hand pump with a little lever that you might push up and down, that you can bleed the air out of the system. And with the newer engines, that's gotten simpler and simpler as they've improved technology. With like a 40-year-old engine, it's a real pain. On a newer engine, it's less of a pain. But in all of the videos I've watched, no one has ever said, okay, after you do this, how long do you have to run the engine to make sure everything's okay and all the air bubbles are out? Because if you get an air bubble in there, the engine's going to stop. And so think about this. I'm changing the fuel filter at the dock in my slip, right? And then the next thing I'm going to do with my boat is I'm going to untie the lines and put it in gear and start going out of my slip down this 100-yard alleyway or fairway, which is a little alley between two rows of boats. And the last thing I want to do is lose my engine when that's going on. So I said, Carter, you got to ask the guy, how long do I have to run the engine to be sure that I know it's going to be okay? And I remember when he got back from the class, I said, okay, Carter, what's the answer? And he said, 15 minutes. And I'd never heard that on YouTube. People just say, run the engine, right? They say it's important to run the engine. So anyway, I think that's the other good thing about this is particularly if you're at a place where, there's a lot of diesel mechanics, a lot of experts, you can ask those types of questions that you may have or that are particular to your situation. So I just think that's just great. And you're right, doing things like changing your oil, changing fuel filters, changing water pumps, changing timing or not fan belts. Those are sort of the everyday maintenance things that you have to do. And that's sort of the stuff I'm comfortable with. I'm probably not going to, take the cylinder head off the engine to do a valve job on it or something. That's way beyond what I'm willing to do. But regardless, I think it's pretty good. The other point I'll make is this course is as Carter said, this course is intended for the layperson. It's not intended for diesel mechanics. If you're a mechanic and that's your trade, it's a much longer course, a much more involved course that they offer. So this is intended for sort of the layperson who's sailing around in their boat and wants to be able to take care of, a handful of things that possibly you're going to need to take care of. And I think the other thing about this is it gives you more knowledge so that if something more serious happens and you have to get your boat or your engine fixed, when you're talking to the person who you're thinking of hiring to fix the engine, you sort of know what kind of questions to ask. It makes you sort of a smarter consumer so that you're going to pick a person that you have more confidence in order to repair your engine and stuff. So I think those are the big sort of things that I took out of it. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, the more you were talking, the more I was thinking, yeah, this costs some money and some time, but this to me sounds like one of those investments that has a return, right?
Yes.
That if you're kind of wondering, is it worth it? I don't think it would take very long to pay back the investment in money. And certainly, I mean, I don't know, how much everybody's time is worth, but and travel and all that stuff, because it seems like having this skill set can save you a heck of a lot of money and even time when something goes wrong. So you're probably going to get all that back. So to me, that's a way to think about something like this, more of an investment rather than a cost. So that's kind of my big takeaway, but I don't know. What do you think? Can you summarize kind of what the key issues are you think here?
Yeah. The one other thing I want to talk about is parts. And I think,
Oh yeah.
Carter talked about this, was that, as a benefit of the course, he got a little memory stick drive that sort of had all of the latest parts and part numbers for his engine, specific for his engine. Because I'll tell you, when you're looking for parts online, I have the manual that came with the engine and it lists a bunch of parts, but many of those part numbers have been superseded once or twice. So, you're always scratching your head. Is this the right part that I'm buying for my engine? So I think that's another big benefit. And I did go on to the Mac Boring, which is the name of the company that Carter went to. And I put this in the show notes. I went onto their website and you can download PDF files that have all the parts listed for your engine. So I think with a little bit of work, you can get that. And to me, that was a good, valuable takeaway, because I'm always struggling when I'm even buying some simple parts well, this one doesn't quite look like the one that I thought I was buying, but it still fits. But does that mean it's still okay? So anyway, Yes, let's wrap it up, Mike.
All right. So definitely, I think we can take away that first, everybody here recommends going to one of these engine repair schools as a consumer. You don't need to be a diesel mechanic to do it. The second is yeah, as we were talking, you don't even need to go in person. It's got to be better in person, I would think, to work on the engine hands-on, but online is better than nothing if you can't get to where they're offering one of these. And third, it seemed like it made a ton of sense to go to one where you can work on the same engine model that you have. Yeah, you can go to a generic one, but the hands-on to me with your own engine makes a ton of sense. And yeah, I love this memory stick idea. I mean, I wish they had this for every car, every dishwasher, right? Everything I own, I try to do the right environmental thing and repair things, right? Rather than throw them away and get a new one. And having a cool source. So this is a cool business idea for somebody, right? Maybe this exists out there, but an easy to access. And I'd pay for something like that, right?
Yeah.
To have an up-to-date, here's all the parts with the diagrams, and here's a direct link to order it. I think that'd be a huge time saver. And again, save some money, because how many times have I bought the wrong thing, right? And either wasted my time until I figured it out, or if I had to return it, there was a return fee, or it was so inexpensive, I didn't bother to return it, something like that. So this is kind of a cool way. So yeah, overall, solid podcast episode, solid interview. What do you think?
Yeah.
Time to wrap this up?
Yeah, I think it is time to wrap this one up, Mike.
All right, listeners, thanks once again for joining us for another episode. And we hope you found our conversation with Carter interesting and thought-provoking, and hopefully it'll urge you, if you haven't already done so, to go check out one of these engine repair courses. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, always feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
And finally, if you enjoy the podcast, hit that follow or like button on your favorite podcasting app. Or if you know of someone that would be a good guest for the show, reach out to us and let us know who they are, and we'll see if we can get them to be a guest. And that includes you. If you think you'd be a good guest on the show and you have some great experiences you'd like to share, don't be bashful. Reach right out to us and let us know. We've had several guests on the show that have come to us that way. So until next time, see you all soon.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks for listening, and see everybody next time.